The 1930s were a particularly tumultuous decade in world history, and they started off with a bang, or more accurately, a crash. The Wall Street crash of October 1929 sent the world spiraling into a Great Depression that would last through most of the decade. The 1930s also saw the rise of fascism and dictatorships throughout the world, Francisco Franco, Mussolini, and not to mention Adolf Hitler. To make matters worse, the 1930s had some huge natural disasters, widespread floods, devastating droughts, and the explosion of Hindenburg. But the 1930s weren't all bad. Pluto was first discovered as the 9th planet in 1930, although that didn't last long. The 30s also saw the debut of the first intercontinental airline flight. The Empire State Building, the Wizard of Oz, the establishment of Social Security, and perhaps most importantly, the creation of the first chocolate chip cookie. However, just as the 1930s came in with a bang, they went out with an even bigger and unwanted one. The beginning of World War II, which broke out in Europe just as the decade came to a close. America in the 1930s was drowning in the Great Depression. At the beginning of the 1930s, more than 15 million Americans, fully 1/4 of all wage-earning workers, were unemployed. President Herbert Hoover did not do much to alleviate this crisis. Patience and self-reliance, he argued, were all Americans needed to get them through this passing incident of our national lives. But in 1932, Americans elected a new president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who pledged to use the power of the federal government to make Americans' lives better. Over the next 9 years, Roosevelt's New Deal created a new role for the government in American life. Though the New Deal did not end depression, it did provide an unprecedented safety net to millions of suffering Americans. It was into this chaotic scene that a ray of sunshine was welcomed into the world. The youngest in her family, Anne Marion, or Nana, was born on February 17, 1933, in Dover, New Hampshire, to Evelyn O'Kane and Bernard O'Kane. As did her 4 older siblings born to the local grocer. She attended the parish schools and graduated from St. Mary's High School in 1951. College was not in the cards for this fiery redhead who was so full of fun and life. She went off to work for the telephone company as well as at the Nazareth Orphanage on the outskirts of Boston. Anne O'Kane was very involved with her family. She was known as the favorite babysitter for the nieces and nephews, and Grammy and Pa, her maternal grandparents, meant the world to her. She cared for them in their final years and was counted on to help others in her small town, and so she did. 61 days after Anne was born, about 260 miles south of Dover, Thomas John Wordy Jr., or Pop, arrived as the first of 3 sons born to Thomas John Wordy Sr. and Margaret Flaherty Wordy. As his father was a Union Carbide company man and his mother a nurse, Tommy grew up in a privileged environment, attending grade school and high school, graduating as the salutatorian before going off to Holy Cross College in Worcester, Massachusetts. Drafted into the Army, he spent 1 year, 11 months, and 29 days serving Uncle Sam at Fort Dixon, New Jersey. His career with IBM began upon his honorable discharge. However, some sort of tumor in his stomach put his plans on pause for a while. Anne's sister Kath had married a New York man, whose family happened to be friends with the Wordy family. At the suggestion of her sister Kath, Anne wrote a get-well-soon card to the young man on Long Island. Poor soul wasn't expecting to make it through this trial. Little did Anne O'Kane know the chapter that was about to unfold. Tom Wordy's miraculous recovery prompted his widowed Aunt Loretta to give him tickets to My Fair Lady, then playing on Broadway. When he invited his aunt to attend the show with him, she graciously declined and told him to find some young lady to treat. Who to take? Well, how about that young lady from New Hampshire who wrote to you? The invitation was made. The young lady, thrilled at the prospect of an exciting night on the town in the spring of 1960, arrived in the Big Apple and stayed with her brother Rob and his family, who also lived on Long Island. The big night arrived, but to Anne's surprise, if not a bit of initial dismay, the glittering night on the town was actually a sedate matinee. Tom was no city slicker, but rather a solid citizen who was a stranger to glitz and any veneer of folly. What a wonderful time they had. The next 12 months were busy. Telegrams were exchanged, visits were made, families met. Expectant wonder grew to promises of fidelity. On May 13, 1961, Anne O'Kane became My Fair Lady to Tom Wearty and remained so for the next 56 years.
Every highway and